Welcome back to Mid-Market Leaders. I'm your host, Jeff Cass. Joining me today is Brandon Leibowitz. Brandon has been in the SEO and digital marketing trenches since 2007. He is the founder of SEO Optimizers, a firm that specializes in helping businesses move past what I'll call the vanity metrics and focus on what actually matters or moves the needle, which is topical authority and conversion. He's appeared in over 300 podcasts. Recently wrote a book called Power of Guest Podcasting that was just published this past January. And he's here to help us understand many things, but also how a mid-market executive might be grading their marketing team's performance. So Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, you bet. Tell us a little bit how you got started in this business and how you started SEO Optimizers.
I just fell into the digital marketing world after I graduated from college. Got my degree in business marketing in 2007. After I graduated, one of the first jobs I was offered was doing SEO, which I didn't know what that meant. I told the company, not sure what this is. They said, don't worry, we're new to this as well. And we want to learn with you and take you to different classes and workshops and seminars. After doing that for a few months, I realized that everyone is probably going to have a website in the future. And there's lots of ways to get traffic. Back then I was helping out with like paid ads, social media. I was doing email marketing, doing search engine optimization, and it all works to get traffic. SEO is just free traffic. And I thought to myself, who wouldn't want free traffic? Why would companies want to pay for ads, which they work, but in the long run, we don't really want to rely on those ads solely. And then eventually I was like, let me make a company out of it and started my company, SEO Optimizers. But I was working full time at advertising agencies as the director of SEO, and before work, after work, and on my lunch breaks, I'd work on my own company, and eventually built that up to where I was able to quit my job and been doing this ever since, helping people tap into that free traffic from search engines or LLMs, wherever people are searching.
Okay. You've been on 300 podcasts, and I certainly want to get to the book, but I want to maybe talk a little bit about something I've heard you at least bring up in the past, and that is using SEO as a tangible business asset. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
If you have SEO in place and good, strong rankings, then that's going to be bringing you in lots of traffic to your website. Hopefully that traffic converts, which is a whole nother part of conversion rate optimization, is make sure that your website is built to get those conversions. But if you're getting targeted visitors to your website, that's going to hopefully bring in more conversions, more sales, more leads, and fill that bottom line and make you more valuable to somebody that's looking at you saying, all right, you're not just relying on paid ads, because if you're relying on paid ads, if you stop running ads, what's going to happen? You're just going to disappear. But with the organic, the SEO side of things, even if you stop doing SEO, you're still going to rank until your competition does more than you and tries to outrank you. So that SEO just brings in a never ending supply of targeted traffic to your website. That's going to then help with those leads, conversions, phone calls, emails, whatever that specific conversion goal you are trying to target.
So if I am a manufacturing company in the US and I have a website and I'm trying to reach a certain population or type of customer out there and I'm paying for ads, that's one type of valuation for that particular company as far as their website. But if I'm another manufacturing company and they have high ranking on SEO and they get many converted leads regularly, that would be worth something, I assume, right? Because you're not paying for those leads, so to speak. You paid to position yourself, if I understand this correctly. But maybe talk a little bit more about the differences of those two scenarios that I gave and how those might be valued.
Yeah, both of them will require some capital investment. Paying for the ads, you have to pay for those ads. Every single ad, you're paying for a click. It's called pay-per-click. So each ad on Google or whatever platform, there's lots of different models. Sometimes it's pay per impression, but in general, you're paying for clicks. And those clicks could be a couple cents per click, could be a couple dollars per click, could be $100 for one click, not even one sale or conversion, just one click to your website. That's why the ads, they get a little expensive, but that's where you gotta look at the return on ad spend and making sure that you're making more than you're putting in. But with SEO, it's not free either. You have to invest time. your time is money, or pay a company or agency to help with your SEO. But in general, it's going to be a lot more cost effective than having to pay a couple dollars for every click, because in the long run, that adds up really fast. And once you stop running those ads, you're just gone. But that helps with SEO valuation, saying, hey, I built up this long-term asset of traffic that's coming to my website, and that's going to keep coming indefinitely until your competitors try to do more than you. But in general,
Mhm.
that's going to be much more cost effective and save you money. And people also trust the organic more than the paid ads. When someone sees a paid ad, they know you're just paying to get up there. Google tries to blend them in so it doesn't look like a paid ad, but in general, most people try to skip over the paid ads and go down to the organic.
Okay. And there is this term that you and I were briefly talking about earlier, EEAT, that potentially boosts your search engine optimization or kind of your standing there. Is that right? Am I interpreting that right?
Yep. So Google made EEAT a while back, saying that this is a big part of SEO. If you're a real business and a real website, Google says, how do we trust you? How can we believe? Because keywords, anybody could put keywords on the website. I could put keywords on my website saying I'm a dentist, and Google's like, wait, Brandon, are you really a dentist? We don't believe you. So Google came around in the 90s and said, we want to look at what are called backlinks. We want to see other websites mentioning you. The more third-party sites that mention you, the more popular you seem, the more trust we're going to give to you, and the higher we're going to rank you in the search results. Backlinks are what made Google back in the 90s. But then people started manipulating them and building low quality backlinks. So Google's like, all right, backlinks are still really important, but we want to make sure they're good quality backlinks. And that's where they put the EEAT: experience, expertise, authority, and trust. They want you to prove that you have experience, you have expertise in the subject matter, you have authority, that you're an authority figure, and that you're trustworthy. So that's where most of that comes from: good quality backlinks, but also on your website. You need to convey that you've been around for a while, or that you're not just starting off, that you have some experience, or that you went to school. Maybe you're just started your company, but you've gone to school for 8 years and learned this and got your master's degree. So just trying to convey that you are really a legitimate, trustworthy business, because Google wants to give them the best results. And if they just show somebody that just gamed the system and manipulated the algorithm, they don't want that to happen. So the
Mhm.
EEAT is something that you can't just build overnight. That takes a lot of time, especially the trust. Google's like, how can we just trust anybody? That's the biggest thing, is trust takes time to build. That's also why SEO takes time to kick in. It's not immediate. With the paid ads, you start running ads, you're going to start getting traffic right away. SEO is a long-term play because of that trust aspect, that they don't want to just rank you and then find out that you don't exist. If I'm that dentist, all of a sudden they're like sending people to my website, or they're sending people to my physical location. If I don't exist, that's a bad user experience. Imagine you drive to some restaurant and there's no restaurant there. You're like, Google, why'd you tell me to go here? And eventually you're not going to use Google anymore. You're like, I don't trust you. So Google doesn't
Mhm.
want to lose that trust either. And they want to make sure that you really are who you say you are.
Okay. And podcasts would be one way maybe to build that trust. Is that right?
That's a good strategy to build trust, because with podcasting or guest podcasting, you're recording yourself. Some of them are audio, but with video, you could see that person, see that company. It puts a face behind that company. You could hear that person speak as an authority figure. And it's not just something where you wrote an article or you put something on your website saying, I've been in business for 20 years. Google's like, all right, we see that, but give us some more context. If I'm a guest on someone else's podcast and I'm talking about all this, and if I really know what I'm talking about, then then that podcast host is going to post it, share it with their audience, and then other people are going to listen to it. Google's going to see that it's being posted on all these websites, it's being shared, people are talking about it. And then the search engines and the LLMs are going to be like, all right, we trust you a little bit more. So it really helps with the EEAT: experience, expertise, authority, and trust.
Okay. Okay. And probably part of the reason why you've been on 300 podcasts and now wrote a book. So maybe let's go into that. How did you arrive at podcasting being a good tool? And then how did you decide to actually write the book?
I would teach classes in person
Mhm.
until I've been doing that since 2013, but then 2020, everything changed. The world shut down. I couldn't teach my classes in person anymore. So I would teach them online. And when I would do Zoom classes, Zoom and record the audio and video separately. So that made me think maybe I just take this audio and use it as like an audio podcast. And I did that for a few months. And then somebody asked me to be a guest on their podcast. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let me be a guest on your podcast. And that made me realize that being a guest on podcasts is going to help me build backlinks. So before that, a big strategy for SEO was guest blogging,
Mhm.
blogging on other people's websites. Blogging on your website is very important, but being a guest on someone else's blog gets you written up on another person's website. It gets you that SEO backlink. So guest podcasting is the same, similar to guest blogging, but guest podcasting, it's a little bit more time intensive. You have to record, you have to be comfortable on the camera. And after I did a couple guest spots, I realized it's actually a little bit easier than having your own podcast. Because having your own podcast, as you probably know, you have to come up with content, ideas, topics, you have to find guests, you have to record, you have to edit. That's a big part as well. Being a guest, I just have to show up, answer questions, and then I'm done, except for the marketing. After that, I want to help promote it and share it as well. But
Mhm.
it's a lot easier than having your own podcast. But the main reason I was on so many guest spots is because of those backlinks. By
Okay.
me being a guest, I would get that backlink. Google sees that as a trust signal, and that helps me move up the search engine rankings.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, the way you're talking about a backlink is it's a link on another person's website that basically goes back to you or the work that you've done. Is that right?
Yep, a backlink is a clickable link on a third-party site that mentions you. So let's say you're reading an article in
Mhm.
LAtimes.com. In there, it says Brandon Leibowitz, and you click on that and it goes to my website. I'd
Mhm.
be getting a backlink from the LAtimes.com. So not all the time when I'm a guest on people's podcasts do they mention my website. So now when I was first starting off, I would always reach out to these podcast hosts and tell them after they published, can you mention my website? Sometimes they'd mention my Instagram or my Facebook, and that's not the same. That just helps Facebook rank higher. Facebook does
Mhm.
not need more traffic. So not every backlink is treated equally, but getting a backlink from another person's website that's niche related to you, that is really difficult to get. And they place a lot more emphasis on those.
Okay. So your book goes into a lot of these details. And if I'm a mid market company that has a website and wants to get leads or commerce online, all of these things help by showing their authority and using the backlinks as well. Is there anything else that might help a mid market leader as they're going down the same path as you?
Yeah, having your own podcast is great. It's great for lead gen as well. If you're a mid-market company and want to have your ideal client profile type of
Mhm.
people as guests, and then you can learn more about them and connect that way. But I also really highly recommend the guest podcasting to help build their websites trust and authority. And also, there's so many extra benefits of being a guest on podcasts. You get all this content that you can repurpose for social media. You tap into other people's audiences, so it helps your company grow as well. But
Mhm.
I really like to focus on that SEO backlink and explain how to find podcasts that have that SEO value, that are going to have a website. I don't always go on podcasts that have a website because I'm happy sometimes just to tap into the other audiences, but I prefer to find the ones that have that website. So I also get that SEO boost in traffic and see my rankings move up.
Okay. If you look at middle market companies or some of your clients, what do you feel like people do really well typically with their online presence and things that they don't do very well with their online presence?
Stuff that people don't do well is creating more pages. A lot of websites are just a couple pages or the bare minimum because most business owners, they think that people don't want to read a lot of content, which is true. A lot of people don't want to read, don't want to have a lot of pages, but search engines and the LLMs like to see that you have lots of content, lots of pages. So breaking up your website and getting granular with it. Like trying to just expand as much as possible. If you're a manufacturing company, you could think, all right, who do I sell my products to? Who's going to buy them? And you can make pages that target those specific audiences. And that's going to help you rank for when that audience is searching for those keywords related to them. Also, adding a lot of text to every single page is very important. I'd keep the top of your page more minimal, more built for people. So getting this balance of Google and people don't want to read a lot of content, but the search engines and the LLMs want to read that text. So the top of your page, it's called above the fold, making that really skimmable, having like a value proposition that lets people know what I'm going to get from using your product or service, what's in it for me, having that call to action, having a lot of the benefits up there. And then lower down, you could have a lot of text down there, because you have to think also, how often do you scroll to the very bottom of the page? Most people don't really scroll too often. So having all the important information at the top for people and then the bottom for Google. So then you're hitting the conversion rate optimization at the top, trying to get those conversions from the website traffic that you get, but also making search engines happy with all that content. That's one of the things I consistently see that most websites don't do. Is I have over 200 pages on my website. I do SEO, but have a page for realtors, have a page for dentists, I have a page for fill in the blank niche. Because if a realtor is searching for real estate SEO companies, if I just mention that briefly on my website, that's not really enough for search engines to say that I'm relevant for that search. But if I have a page that's dedicated to that, makes me more relevant. And also the end user, the realtor that goes to that page is like, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for, SEO. And all that content is then going to help me get more conversions. So trying to break it up and get granular, which it's a work in progress. It takes time to do all that, but more pages are always going to be better than less pages.
Okay. So if I'm a mid-market leader and I have a third-party marketing firm, what are the questions I should ask them that would really maybe help me understand how effective they're being?
Yeah, I would try to look at the bottom line, like how much traffic are you getting? And then how many conversions are you getting from that traffic? Because that part is really important. Usually the marketing companies don't work too much with building the website. That's where you might have to work with your web developer and make sure that you're like, all right, now that we're getting all this traffic, how do we maximize the value of every visitor to make sure that they just don't come and go? So I'd also look at what's called the bounce rate or engagement rate. How many people come to your website and leave immediately? And that's shown in Google Analytics, or if you have other analytical tools, they usually show you that. They might have a different name for it, but that will show you how long people are sticking and staying on your website. In general, about half your traffic is going to leave immediately for countless reasons. Your website loads slowly, or the pricing might be too high that they leave, but try to figure that out, because getting traffic is step one. And that's where I would always focus. In the past, when I started first doing SEO, I'd rank my clients' websites and I'd get them all this traffic, but some of them are like, I'm not getting any leads. And that's why I realized we got to look at this more holistically and look at the bottom line of how many conversions are you getting? What's going on with the website? How's your funnel built? I've even had sometimes where the contact form doesn't work. So let's just QA the website and just make sure everything's working, everything's going smoothly. That way it's a good user experience for the end user. And you get that bottom line, which is really what most businesses care about, is the bottom line. They don't really care about traffic. They want traffic, but that's not the end goal.
On how do you track conversions? Because you got so many different types of businesses. You mentioned real estate. We might be talking about a large equipment manufacturer. How can you track a conversion if you're only in the online world?
You could set up different conversions for whatever goals that you want to set up. Usually you would track, if you're a manufacturing company and you're doing lead gen, which I have somewhere they don't even sell products online. They just want people contacting them. We could track with click to call. So you could see how many people click on your website, phone number, if you have a phone number, or you could set up call tracking or set up a different phone number on your website that specifically is to track the online leads. You could also track how many people fill out a form, but sometimes people might go to your website from SEO and they don't contact you right away. They might see your ad or something else. So that might attribute to getting that conversion. So it's not a perfect science, but there are different goals that you can set up in Google Analytics for even how many people join your newsletter. Or if you have lead magnets, you could say how many people downloaded this ebook or booked a demo of my product, or whatever that conversion goal is. That's where every business is going to be different. If you're selling a product, it's a little bit more straightforward. It's actually the easiest. If you're selling a product, you can see how many people bought it online and you can
Sure.
track revenue directly. But for lead gen, it's a little different where you're like, all right, now we got to track the phone calls, the emails, or just see whatever other aspects that we want to track on the website. We could set up that conversion tracking.
Yeah, if there's a long sales cycle for a product that's more complicated, somehow they have to tag that lead when it came in so they know 10 months down the road or however long it takes for that lead actually to turn into a conversion. Is that basically it?
Yep. Even like for myself, they're going to do research, they're going to check me out on social. I do email marketing follow-ups and trying to have a lot of touch points to build that trust. So sometimes it's tough to attribute where do they first find you to where they actually convert, but it all works together because you got to be everywhere nowadays because people are going to different places, different platforms. It's not just how it was back in the early 2000s of pretty much Google and Yahoo would bring some traffic. But nowadays there's so many touch points, social media. It's really changed the game. So trying to be omnipresent helps a lot.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So one of the biggest challenges I think for everyone, and maybe it's even more in the digital world, is how do you find and retain top talent?
That part is always the tricky part, trying to find good talent, get them up to speed with the systems and processes. And that's one of the things that I've been just trying to work on having, just really trying to find good talent and asking them beforehand. So trying to figure out like on the interview, here's an example scenario of a client. What would you do in this situation? Or here's a page on a website. What would you write for this SEO title tag, which gets a little technical, but then you can see, do they know what a title tag is? Do they know how to do how would they approach keyword research? They figure out, is this a good keyword that has buyer intent with good search volume, which is really important when you're doing SEO, trying to find those good keywords that have a lot of monthly searches.
Okay.
Try to really give people like little tests. I feel like is the best to see, do they really know what they're talking about?
I see. Okay. Yeah. How are you or your employees using AI inside the business? And then you mentioned the LLMs with the way SEO is changing. So maybe talk about both those topics if you will. I'm interested in that.
Luckily, the best practices have not really changed. Like Google owns Gemini, which is a big one. The ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI, which is heavily funded by Microsoft. Microsoft is Bing. So ChatGPT was really put into Bing search results. And then Google's, wait, if Bing is going to have ChatGPT, we got to release our AI. So really the AIs are kind of search engines rebranded. They look at the same like content. They look at schema. They want you to put frequently asked questions on your website. They're looking at the mentions, those backlinks, those trust signals, especially nowadays when most people are probably just going to AI and saying, write me a blog post or write me a content for my website. Everything's going to be really generic. It's all a lot of AI content. So it's like, how do you differentiate yourself and make yourself stand out? Because if you're just posting a blog post that was written by AI on your website, how is that really going to be different than the 10 other companies that are doing it? So those backlinks are still a really big part of SEO and the LLMs, but it does change how people search. That's the biggest thing is a lot of people aren't just going to Google and looking at those 10 blue links anymore. They're going to ChatGPT or whatever LLM they use, and they're just getting that answer right there, which is also taking traffic away from websites, which is a little tricky. Now it's a lot of zero click searches where people search and they get the answer. They don't even need to go to your website anymore. So it's all hasn't changed too much, but the way people search is definitely changed, and trying to accommodate that is a big shift in everything that even the end user is now not really going to websites as much. But the way we use AI internally is also a lot of content. So I have a lot of writers that write content. Unfortunately, most of them just use AI and then would charge me full price for an article or blog post. So using AI to help create content, Google said a couple of years ago, we don't care anymore who writes your content. If it's human or AI, we can't tell the difference.
Mhm.
So having AI write your content is perfectly fine. It's just not accurate. So Google said, you can use AI, but it has to be accurate. It has
Mhm.
to be helpful. That's one of the big things that it said, we want helpful content. So if you just copy verbatim from ChatGPT to your website, it's probably not going to be accurate. So double, triple checking, using editors to edit the content is something that's been shifting, but having AI write content is probably one of the biggest things that I do for, and that probably most people are using AI for, but
Okay.
it also could help out with a lot of other tasks like summarizing or transcribing content or transcribing videos, like helping with SOPs to make things a little bit more streamlined. Or
Mhm.
if I'm on like a podcast, I could have AI transcribe it and then help me create a blog post or help me create summary notes about it or time stamping it. So there's a lot of different use cases depending on what your
Mhm.
business is. But I'm sure that the more creative you get with it, the more helpful it becomes.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of applications. It sounds like right now it's mostly productivity, simplifying some of the tasks that you have. Okay. I got time for one more question for you here. And maybe along those lines, for you, you're immersed in SEO. You see what's going on. You see how fast the LLMs and AI is moving. What advice would you give for a new executive or a new CEO as they're looking at their business and marketing?
I would recommend try to be omnipresent. Try to think if you were looking for your product or service, where would you be searching? Because
Mhm.
it is great to be everywhere, but that also takes a lot of time and effort. And try to really focus like, who is my audience? If I was looking for my product or service, where would I go? What are the first starting points? And trying to really push those and build those up and hone in on those and then eventually expand out to more and more channels, more and more places. But really trying to figure out like, who is my audience? Where are they going? If I'm working with like a plumber, are
Mhm.
people going on Facebook looking for a plumber? Not really. Some people might, but not many people are going to look on Facebook. So trying to figure out like, all right, let's focus on Google or let's focus on Yelp or Angie's List, because that's where we know that you're getting the majority of your business. And let's really try to perfect that channel first. Or if
Mhm.
you're e-commerce and you're selling a lot on Amazon, let's try to perfect Amazon and really get that working well. And then later on, we could go to these other channels that maybe have my audience, but aren't as big and prevalent, but trying to be everywhere. If you have a big team, you could do that, but it also spreads everyone thin and trying to really become the go-to for that channel. And then expanding from that is going to help get quick wins versus trying to be everywhere. You're going to spread yourself thin and you have to learn how to market on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. And they're all different, even though they're social media, they're all different audiences, different algorithms, different channels or platforms that are constantly shifting too and changing how you could use their website, what tools they're giving you or taking away features from their website.
Okay. So really narrow in that focus and the way to connect with customers that is best. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because a lot of people are like, you want to be everywhere. And I tell people you want to be everywhere, but first you gotta make sure that you got your core platforms dialed in, and then you could keep going on and expanding to these other platforms and other channels. But like for myself, I've tried to be everywhere at first and it just spreads myself too thin and my team too thin that there's like, all right, we're everywhere, but are we really doing the best that we could do on every channel? Not really. We're just giving it like 80%. When if we just focus on one or two platforms, then we could give it 100% and really make sure we do the best. And we know that our audience is here. That's going to
Mhm.
help the bottom line move quicker.
Yeah. Okay. Understand. All right, Brandon. Look, I really appreciate you being on the show. I think we got a very interesting conversation here to share with the audience. Good luck with the book. Where can everybody find the book?
If they go to Amazon and search The Power of Guest Podcasting, they'll find it up there. Or if you just search guest podcasting on Amazon, it's the blue book. So I'm doing SEO on my own Amazon listing to make sure that I pop up there and just making sure that you can find it easily.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thanks again. I appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me on today.